The sun over Kandar Province hung heavy in the sky, turning the air into gold dust that clung to skin and uniforms. Camp Valor was a sprawl of beige tents, idling Humvees, and men pretending not to notice the heat. Helicopters droned somewhere beyond the horizon, their sound folding into the rhythm of the bass. In the briefing tent, Captain Mason Hale leaned on a map table, crisp and sure of himself, his tone carrying the smooth confidence of a man who had never been tested. He turned toward Staff Sergeant Erin Blake, a quiet figure in desert fatigues who had been standing in the back. The captain told her he could show her how to shoot, mentioning his college competition team, as if that meant something out here. She nodded once, polite and unreadable, and thanked him. The others chuckled softly, assuming the joke landed as intended. Erin let the moment pass, her face still, her hands resting loosely on the notebook that held a lifetime of wind calls and ranges no one in that room could imagine. Outside, the light burned low as she walked past rows of vehicles coated in dust. A group of Marines laughed nearby, their voices fading into the hum of the camp. Erin paused for a second, eyes narrowing toward the horizon where the sound of rotors thumped softly. She wasn't angry. She was used to it. Every base, every rotation, the same story. Let them think what they wanted. She knew what the rifle knew. Camp Valor stretched wide across the Kandar Desert, a sea of canvas and dust where nothing ever stood still. Generators hummed day and night, shaking the thin walls of the tents. The air smelled of sand, diesel, and sweat, and every gust of wind carried a thin veil of grit that coated rifles, boots, and faces alike. Helicopters came and went, their rotor blades chopping the air with a steady rhythm that no one noticed anymore. Staff Sergeant Erin Blake moved through it all like smoke. She wore the same uniform as everyone else, same patches, same gear, yet somehow, she seemed to fade at the edges. People passed her without really seeing her. To most, she was just the liaison from the Army, attached to the Marine Expeditionary Unit for Joint Coordination. A support role. Nothing special. They didn't know about the sniper logbook tucked inside her pack, or the years she had spent lying still behind a scope while the world held its breath. She spoke little and worked quietly, moving between command tents, vehicle bays, and the range with the same steady calm. In meetings, she sat at the edge of the room, hands folded, listening more than she spoke. She had learned long ago that silence kept her safe. It also kept her underestimated. The new officers never looked twice. They called her soldier, sometimes ma'am, but never asked what she could do. When the day ended and the camp lights flickered on, Erin would walk the perimeter alone, watching the horizon fade into darkness. The desert night felt endless and kind in its emptiness. Out here, no one demanded anything from her. She could just disappear into the hum of engines and the whisper of the wind. Some people came to war to prove something. Erin had already done that years ago. Now she stayed quiet, steady, waiting. The best shooters, her grandfather once said, are the ghosts no one ever sees until it's already over. Northern Wyoming was a wide, quiet place where the wind never stopped moving. The sky seemed too big for the land beneath it, stretching from one ridge to the next with nothing to block its reach. Erin Blake grew up there on her grandfather's ranch, a place built from wood, grit, and old Marine discipline. Frank Blake had served as a sniper in the 1st Marine Division during the Korean War, and he carried the cold of Chosin Reservoir in his bones long after he came home. Life on the ranch followed its own rhythm. Morning chores at 6, coffee at the same kitchen table, the slow creak of boots on frozen ground. When the work was done, Frank would take Erin out to the far pasture with his old M1 Garand, the rifle he had brought back from Korea. The metal was worn smooth, the wood polished from years of use. He showed her how to breathe between shots, how to wait for the wind to settle, how to make every round count. He said shooting wasn't about being fast. It was about being right. At 12, she could drop tin cans at 300 yards. At 16, she was hitting prairie dogs farther than most grown men could see. Frank didn't praise her often. He didn't have to. His small nods were enough. The lessons weren't just about rifles or distance. They were about patience, respect, and the stillness between decisions. When he passed, the house fell silent in a way that felt final. Erin found the rifle locked in its case, the steel cold against her hands. Inside was a folded piece of paper with a single number written in pencil. 14. His confirmed kills. She kept it tucked inside her uniform pocket through basic, through sniper school, through every deployment that followed. Years later, she realized what he had really given her. Not just the rifle or the skill, but the understanding that silence and precision were their own kind of power. Erin Blake enlisted in the Army at 21, a year after her grandfather's funeral. The recruiter told her that her education would be wasted in the infantry, but she signed the papers anyway. She wanted to prove that patience and precision still mattered in a world that favored noise. The first year was all grind and waiting. Long days on the range, nights spent reviewing field manuals by flashlight, and constant reminders that the Army wasn't built for quiet people. When the Army sniper course finally opened slots, she applied 3 times before being accepted. Out of 2 women in her class, she was the only one to finish. Training was brutal. Endless field exercises, data collection, and hours behind the scope until her hands went numb. In the final evaluation, she placed 2nd overall. There was no celebration, just a nod from an instructor who told her she was better than most men he'd trained. Erin only smiled, packed her gear, and left the range. Her first deployment was to Kandahar, attached to a ranger platoon as part of a 2-person sniper team. Her spotter, Staff Sergeant Rick Harris, was sharp and steady, a man who cared more about results than reputation. Over 6 months, they logged 19 confirmed kills. Everyone was clean free, verified through after-action reports and range cards. Harris filed a commendation request, attaching the documentation. A few weeks later, it came back stamped insufficient corroboration. No reason given. Just a signature and a handshake from the company clerk. Erin didn't argue. She had learned that silence carried farther than protest. Recognition, she realized, was for people who needed it to keep going. She didn't. The record existed whether anyone believed it or not. Captain Mason Hale arrived at Camp Valor with the confidence of a man who had never been tested. He was 34, a West Point graduate with perfect posture and a voice that filled every room. His boots were clean, his uniform pressed, and his certainty untouched by dust or doubt. He believed leadership was about control, not understanding, and he carried that belief like a badge. During a morning briefing, his eyes caught the duty roster on the wall. Staff Sergeant Erin Blake, listed as sniper. He frowned, assuming it was a clerical error. After the meeting, he called her aside. He spoke with the kind of easy authority that expected agreement, offering to teach her how to shoot, explaining that he used to compete in college matches. Erin nodded once, thanked him politely, and walked away without another word. Her silence, mistaken for ignorance, became the story that spread through camp by nightfall. Within days, the rumor took root. Soldiers whispered that the captain was training the quiet Army girl, that she was more mascot than marksman. Mission rosters went out, and her name disappeared from every list. Others were chosen for Overwatch assignments, men with half her range and none of her patience. She didn't fight it. Fighting would only confirm what they thought. Instead, she kept her head down, cleaning her rifle in the dim light of her tent, logging wind data that no one would read. At night, the camp settled into the low hum of generators and the distant thump of helicopters. Erin worked in silence, a figure almost invisible against the dull tan of the base. The isolation didn't break her. It sharpened her. She knew that recognition built on noise faded fast. The kind earned in quiet would last forever. The request came through at 17:30, a short, encrypted message from a SEAL task unit operating in northern Kandar. The words were simple. Send your best. No politics. The operations officer, a major with tired eyes and a desk full of reports, began flipping through sniper files one by one. He wasn't expecting much. Most records looked the same. Range scores, deployment summaries, commendations that never left the inbox. Then he opened one that didn't fit the pattern. Staff Sergeant Erin Blake. 37 confirmed kills, verified logs, spotter statements, complete after-action reports. He read through the file twice, his expression shifting from disbelief to quiet curiosity. A sniper with that record sitting unnoticed in a liaison slot. He called her in just before dusk. When she stepped into the tent, he asked why she never mentioned any of it. She answered simply, that no one had ever asked. Her tone was calm, almost detached, as if the numbers meant little to her. The major nodded slowly, told her to stand by for reassignment, and dismissed her with a look that said more than words. That night, Erin sat alone in her tent, the light from a small lantern flickering against the canvas. She reached into her pocket and unfolded a worn piece of paper, its corners soft from years of being carried through sand and rain. The number 14 was barely visible now, written in pencil by her grandfather's hand. She traced it with her thumb, remembering his voice, his slow patience, the stillness he taught her to find before every shot. Outside, the desert wind whispered through the base. Tomorrow, she would head north. She didn't think of proving anything to anyone. She just wanted to see if she still had what he taught her to be. The rotors of the MH-60 Seahawk cut through the dawn sky as the helicopter lifted from Camp Valor. The desert below looked endless, a mix of gold dust and scattered rock. Erin Blake sat strapped near the door, her rifle case between her knees, her helmet pressed against the frame as the wind howled through the open side. The flight north was short, just under an hour, and when the Seahawk touched down at Daria Outpost, she stepped out into air that felt thinner, colder, quieter. Colonel Dean Mercer met her near the landing pad. He was in his 50s, lean and gray at the temples, his uniform worn from years of field work. He studied her file before speaking. 43 confirmed kills, all verified, spotter statements, after-action reports. He looked up, measuring her with a glance, then handed her the mission folder. The target was a Taliban financier named Kandar, scheduled to move between safe houses west of the valley. The shot, if it came, would have to cross 830 meters of open terrain, too far for most shooters. Not for her. An hour later, she and Petty Officer Luke Harlow moved up a ridge overlooking the compound. The climb was slow, the sun already sharp against the sand. Once they reached position, she unfolded the bipod on her M2010 enhanced sniper rifle chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum Mini. The weapon was familiar, its weight an extension of her breathing. She adjusted her Leupold Mark IV scope, checked the zero, and chambered a round. Harlow unpacked the Kestrel 5700 Elite ballistic computer, feeding in numbers as they worked together. Temperature, barometric pressure, humidity, slope angle, ballistic coefficient. Everything mattered here. The air shimmered with heat mirage rising off the valley floor. Erin studied the pattern through the scope, watching the wind drift in small waves across the dry grass. Harlow read the data back to her. Steady and low. Wind 3 left, Hold. She shifted half a click, slowing her breath until her pulse faded from her fingertips. Below, figures began to move. A man in a tan jacket stepped into the open, walking toward a waiting vehicle. Kandar. The radio cracked once with confirmation from the SEAL team watching from a drone feed. Erin settled behind the rifle, eyes locked to the reticle. She waited for the space between heartbeats, then exhaled. The shot broke clean. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, the report echoing off the ridge. Time stretched thin as the bullet arced through the air, dropping 11 meters over 2.5 seconds before finding its mark. Kandar folded instantly. Dust rose around the vehicle as others scrambled for cover. Harlow's voice came soft and sure. Target down. Mercer, standing behind them with binoculars, didn't speak at first. He watched the compound dissolve into chaos, then lowered the glass. That was flawless. Erin began clearing her rifle, calm and methodical. The colonel crouched beside her, his tone even. "Why were you benched?" She paused, eyes still on the valley. "People see what they expect, sir." Mercer nodded once. After today, not anymore. She packed her gear as the noise of the fight faded into distance. The shot had lasted less than 3 seconds, but it had changed everything. The ridge was silent again, except for the wind moving through the rocks, carrying the sound of something like respect. The briefing room at Camp Valor was silent, except for the hum of the ceiling fan. Dust hung in the air, catching the light that filtered through the blinds. The SEAL team sat near the back, still in their gear, while the operations staff filled the front row with stiff backs and guarded faces. Colonel Dean Mercer stood at the head of the table, a folder in his hand. When he laid it down, the sound cut through the stillness like a shot. Erin Blake's name was printed across the top. He opened the file slowly, spreading its contents across the table. Range cards, ballistic data, after-action reports, confirmed kill lists, ISR footage from northern Kandar. Each page was stamped and verified. Mercer spoke without raising his voice, but every word carried weight. Staff Sergeant Blake has 43 confirmed kills, no missed engagements, no mission failures, perfect discipline. He paused, letting the facts settle. No one moved. Captain Mason Hale sat 3 chairs down, hands clasped tightly in front of him. A bead of sweat ran down his temple. Mercer turned his gaze on him, calm but sharp. "You offered to teach her how to shoot," he said. The captain shifted, trying to find his footing, his voice unsteady. "Sir." But Mercer cut him off. Still quiet, still deliberate. "Next time you try to teach someone, make sure you know more than they do." The room went completely still, the kind of silence that strips away rank and pretense. Hale's face tightened, but he said nothing. Around him, a few officers avoided looking at Erin. She stood near the back, hands behind her back, expression unreadable. No smirk, no satisfaction, just the same quiet focus she carried into every mission. Mercer gathered the papers, aligning them neatly before closing the folder. Meeting dismissed. Chairs creaked as people rose, no one daring to speak. As the room emptied, Mercer looked once toward Erin. It was a small nod, but it said everything words couldn't. Respect, recognition, the kind that could never be given, only earned. Colonel Dean Mercer wrote the recommendation himself. The language was formal, precise, stripped of anything unnecessary. Staff Sergeant Erin Blake demonstrated exceptional composure under pressure, engaging an enemy high-value target at a range of 830 meters. Her precision prevented a ground assault that would have cost multiple lives. Attached were Petty Officer Harlow's after-action report, ISR confirmation, and sworn statements from every SEAL who witnessed the shot. Mercer signed the nomination with steady handwriting, the kind used by a man who understood the weight of every word. 2 weeks later, the award ceremony was held behind the command tent. No formation fanfare, no brass band, just a small gathering under the pale afternoon sun. Soldiers lined up in quiet rows, boots sinking into the dust, their faces unreadable. The wind moved through the flag like a slow breath. Mercer stepped forward and unfolded a single page. His voice carried just enough to reach the back. He read her citation clearly. The words deliberate and unembellished, the precision, the restraint, the calm. When he spoke her name, the silence broke. The first few claps were hesitant, then grew stronger, filling the still air. Men who had never spoken to her before stood straighter. The same officers who once overlooked her now looked with something that resembled respect. Erin didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon as Mercer pinned the bronze star with the V device to her uniform. The metal caught the light for a brief moment, reflecting gold against the sand. She didn't feel pride or victory, only balance. For years, she had carried the quiet burden of being unseen. Now the silence felt lighter, no longer a weight but a space she had earned. The applause faded, the wind stayed, and, for the first time, her name meant exactly what it should. Evening light stretched across the Wyoming plains, soft and gold against the fading sky. Erin Blake sat on the porch of her grandfather's old ranch house, the boards creaking beneath her boots. The air was cool and dry, carrying the smell of grass and dust, the same scent that had followed her since childhood. A kettle whistled faintly inside, but she didn't move. Her hands rested on the table beside her, steady and quiet, as if time itself had slowed. From her pocket, she pulled out a small folded piece of paper. The edges were frayed, the center worn smooth from years of being opened and closed in desert winds and rain. She unfolded it carefully. The pencil marks were almost gone now, a faint number 14 still visible if the light hit just right. Her grandfather's handwriting, his lesson, his promise. She smiled softly, tracing the faded number with her thumb, remembering the crack of the M1 Garand across the field and the calm voice that told her the best shooters are the ones nobody notices. Her own record had long surpassed his, 43 confirmed kills. But the number meant little now that me see. The paper wasn't about counting. It was about remembering. She folded it again, placed it back in her pocket, and leaned into the wind. The fields rippled under the setting sun, endless and still. For the first time in years, there was nothing left to prove, only the quiet, the land, and the peace that came from knowing she had done exactly what she was meant to do.